Hello and welcome everyone. Julio Petrovich here, Product Manager at NetAlly. Thank you for joining us on today's Tech Chat about common Wi-Fi issues caused by wired problems. This time focusing on edge switching. And with me today, we got a super special guest, Mr. Roel Dionisio. Hey Roel, how's it going, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Hey, welcome. You're an expert on this kind of stuff. So we wanted to have you share your knowledge with the rest of the attendees here today. And a quick, super very basics, guys, before we get started. So let's keep this session interactive. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them anytime in the chat, and we'll ask those to Roel live. So don't be shy about it. Just ask questions whenever you want. Also, at the end, if there's still any extra questions left, I will have a short QA time or session, so we can go back to any questions that were left over. So anyway, Roel, I guess we should get started here. And the main question for today is, how is it that edge switching can impact Wi-Fi network performance? You will think it's more about, routings, uh, packets from one place to the other, maybe some power with PoE and stuff, but how can that really become an issue on the Wi-Fi side of things?
Yeah, because everything is Wi-Fi nowadays. So any issue kind of stems as a Wi-Fi problem, right? Because most common Wi-Fi issues are really wired problems. Because that doesn't happen, right? Like I'm sure many of us have come across wired issues that they look like Wi-Fi issues.
Yeah, I've heard, I don't know if this is true or not, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard sometimes like 75, 80% of Wi-Fi issues are like based on the wired, some come from the wired side technically. And I don't know if that's a real statistic or not, but sounds pretty close.
I should start keeping track then. Then I can start saying what percentage of my issues are wired versus Wi-Fi.
Well, then I'll let you start there and go and show
Sure.
us some of the examples or issues you've encountered out there.
Yeah, sure. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us here on this chat about common Wi-Fi issues caused by wired problems. So my contact info is at the top left there if you want to reach me via email or on Twitter. You can reach out to me if you have any further questions. But a little bit about myself. My name is Roel Dionisio. I'm CWE number 210. I co-host a Wi-Fi podcast called Clear to Send, and you could go there, clearsend.net, to listen to any Wi-Fi specific episodes. But I am a network engineer. I do networking in higher education, but I also do consulting across the United States, helping organizations with any network engineering tasks they might have, even Wi-Fi under Packet 6. So our agenda, and I'm not going to talk about all the common issues, there's a lot of them, but I kind of touched upon the ones that I see often in the field, right? So we're going to talk about switch ports, VLANs, PoE, and also link negotiation. So why don't we just jump into the switch ports, because that's the common one, right? A common problem during provisioning or deployment. Your installer connects an AP into the switch, but then there's problems right off the bat, right? You're not there on site. Maybe you're even in a different state or even a different country. So maybe the AP was plugged into the wrong port, for example. And sometimes there's no easy way to even trace that cable down to the switch port, right? So someone might just walk into the room and go, I don't know which port. They're all lit, they're all green. I don't know which one's the AP. So you want to know whether the switch port is configured properly. Now, one of those ways would be logging into the switch and trying to find that AP. If you know like the MAC address, for example, or if somebody followed a cut sheet, but maybe it's an access port when it should be a trunk port, for example, right? It could be up, but it's not servicing clients. So on the right, I have a screenshot there. I like to use the Etherscope NXG to leverage CDP or LLDP, and a field tech can have this with them. They plug into that port, and they'll be able to find out right away which switch and port it's connected to. And it's part of something called the auto test feature. And there's all these different settings that you can enable, disable, depending on how quick of a test you want to do. So this is a common issue that I see where the AP is installed, it got plugged into a switch, but users aren't connecting, right? And so you always get that call or that ticket saying Wi-Fi isn't working, but you don't know what that issue is. And so sometimes I recommend starting at the physical layer. Like, is it plugged into the right port? That's specifically something I ask for whenever it's a new deployment. And I've had access points plugged into the wrong switch. I've been in scenarios where in the closet, there's 2 tenants, right? Maybe they plugged it into the wrong switch, the other tenant switch. And so these are the kind of checks we do when we're on site. And if the field techs have tools like this, they can do tests pretty easily, right? This is something I would do in also like a new tenant moving into a building and they're using existing Ethernet drops. So I will plug into there and figure out which switch and switch port it's plugged into in the closet. The next common Wi-Fi issue I see, this is probably one of the biggest ones, is the VLAN, right? Here on the right side, I have a Wi-Fi test. You can see with the arrow I'm pointing to DHCP because DHCP was not successful in this test. So as part of the troubleshooting, you might not know if the end user is able to see the SSID, if they can associate, pass authentication, get DHCP in this example, et cetera, right? So which step in getting connected are we having issues? That is often something we don't get in a ticket, or the user doesn't describe this because they aren't able to, right? So from there, when I plug in the Etherscope, I can, or not plug in, but I use the quick test, the Wi-Fi test, to see here I have a demo test profile that I set up, and it's connecting to an SSID that I have labeled RD test 1 on channel 48, but I'm just not getting DHCP. So from here, we can have a direction of where we should troubleshoot next, right? Am I missing a VLAN somewhere? Is it because the AP is configured, the switch port is configured for a different native VLAN, for example? Or maybe just everything, the VLAN configuration is messed up, even up to the uplinks on the switch, right? Maybe you're missing that VLAN there as well. So in the field, again, the techs can leverage the Etherscope to troubleshoot quickly and then upload these results to Link Live, and they can share it with me. And I can see remotely going, oh, okay, you plugged into that port. Let me log into the switch real quick and reconfigure that, right? That's where the network engineer or the administrator can be efficient remotely without having to walk someone through, even maybe a non-technical person, on what they have to do to plug in, so we don't have to be on site. Because sometimes we don't have that luxury of getting on a plane and traveling on site to troubleshoot this issue, because it takes too long and it could be just costly. And so in the next slide here, I have a Meraki switch, and I can see that my SSID has a VLAN tag of VLAN 120. So in my tool, the Etherscope, I am actually looking for VLAN 120. And you can see that all I'm seeing, and this is not a video, it's a screenshot, but that packet counter would increase, and it's only seeing packets on the untagged VLAN ID. So I'm not seeing VLAN 120. So either my next step in troubleshooting is, should this SSID be configured for VLAN 20, or is it just the native VLAN 1? Or maybe I just didn't add the VLAN to the switch, right? The Etherscope is not seeing it. So it kind of helps direct me in troubleshooting a specific issue. And more often than not, it's somebody else trying to gather that data for me so I can make the next step, either logging into the switch or having somebody else configure something on somewhere else. Maybe it's not routing somewhere. Like, I don't want to go too much into routing because routing has been issues in the past, but just bringing it down to the edge switch level, trying to think about what types of problems you may run into. And near the end of this presentation, I'll talk about other issues to look at. They're not so much common issues, but they are issues regardless because a lot of misconfigurations can happen. I know not a lot of us are using automation, network automation, so you may be having someone configure this manually, you may be using a template, maybe something was fat fingered, right? It happens. I've done it myself. I think just the other day I was configuring a wireless, a switch for wireless and the access points. We brought up the uplinks, but the APs, I could see them getting power on the switch, but they weren't joining to a controller. As I started troubleshooting, I realized, oh, you know, I added the wrong VLAN on the uplink. I missed it by a number. It was like one, I may have to use 120, but I typed in 121 instead, or 129. So those are the kind of issues we have to troubleshoot, whether you're on site or remote. It's just a matter of having that troubleshooting methodology and knowing where to go next once you're presented with information such as this.
Yep, typos do happen.
I'm gonna take a pause there. Yeah, they happen all the time. It's a matter of knowing what to do when you make that typo, right? Like not to freak out. I know people will start breathing down your neck and wanting to know what the status update is, but kind of have to focus and really start to understand, okay, where's the issue? Where do I go from here? I see untagged packets, but I don't see VLAN 120. What do I got to do next? Let me check the switch port. Maybe I'm missing the VLAN. So you have to have kind of that methodology in troubleshooting.
Yep.
I'll kind of pause there. Any other questions any questions that may have came up?
Let's see. So far, none. We have a shy crowd today, but I'll let you know if anyone has any questions. Well, I do have a question. So you mentioned Link Live earlier. On your experience, how often have you had to do this type of troubleshooting remotely by have like someone on site do the basically plug in the cable for you, and then basically you're doing the analysis remotely?
Yeah, a lot of times I work by myself, so I do upload them just for my own purpose for either documenting what I've done and what I'm working on, because I know you're dealing with, if you're dealing with one switch, there's 48 ports. I'm not going to remember what I did for port 10 when I'm already on port 48. But when I do happen to work with somebody else and they have an Ethoscope, they share it with me, and I could see like the screenshots they upload. I can see exactly the details you would see here, like on the screen. I can go back, like I could see in the quick test where they failed and maybe help them. They may not know like the communication process for Wi-Fi, so I can help direct them going, okay, look, you did associate to the SSID, so the SSID is broadcasting, but here's where it failed. It's beyond Wi-Fi. It's actually down at a different layer in the network stack, right? And these quick tests, like here's a scenario. I could stage up my Ethoscope, put in a quick test with all the parameters, the SSID, the password, or 8021X, and then ship it to them. And all they got to do is run that quick test, right? They tap on it, hit start, and then it has a Wi-Fi radio on it, so it'll just connect to the SSID. So I could have them run that test and then have that test uploaded to Link Live so I could see it. So I don't do it often, but I already have the process in place when I do with somebody else.
Okay, cool. Oh, there's
so it's a pretty collaborative aspect.
Yeah, okay. There's one question here, although I think I can answer this one. They're like, this is from Eric. Is this just about your hardware? No, Eric. Technically, we're using the Ethoscope as examples, to provide examples on how to do troubleshooting, but this applies to basically any product you may want to use.
Yeah, I'm just using Ethoscope as an example because we're kind of in the meeting with NetAlly, but I will give you kind of like how I would troubleshoot this without an Ethoscope, right? If I had an AP come up for example, this SSID broadcasting, and people were associating, but they weren't getting internet, so it would take me longer to figure out what that is, right? Because first I have to get a hold of the user or users and go, all right, what exactly is the issue? Is it one person? Are we having more of a widespread issue? If so, okay, it's a widespread issue. Let me now kind of narrow it down. I see that people, they are saying they can see the SSID, they can tap on it, they can join it, but no internet. All right, for me, I know that means SSID is fine, maybe it's a network issue. All right, now I have to go in and go, first thing I would see is the VLAN. All right, it's the right VLAN, I know it's worked in other sites, or maybe it works on a different floor, that's the VLAN it should be on. Then now I gotta go down to a switch level, right? Is that switch port for that AP, does it have the right VLAN tag? Is it the same for other APs? Like, are there other APs on that same floor that are working, and maybe it's just this one? There's a whole lot of steps that I gotta do. Where if someone was on site, you could use a tool. It doesn't have to be the Etherscope. It could be another tool. It could be the laptop, right? Plug in a laptop where maybe the AP was plugged into, or even directly to the switch port, and see what you get there. Does the laptop get an IP address? It's just a matter of what can I do to make it easier for me and for somebody who's going to be troubleshooting for me on site, gathering that data. And more often than not, it's a non-technical person deemed as the technical person for everyone in that area, right? Like everyone decides on one person who's the most technical because maybe that person fixed the printer by rebooting it, right? He's deemed the technical person. And so that's a person I'm going to work with to try to figure out what the problem might be. And so I have to be very specific. I think it helps with your communication skills as you try to communicate what they need to do next. And also it helps you really understand from all layers of the network how to troubleshoot and what to expect, right? So over time you develop like this list of, all right, this is the symptom, I'm going to go here next to troubleshoot, right? So once I see that users can associate, to me, okay, the AP is functioning and SSID is broadcasting, let me see if it's a network issue with DHCP. DHCP just happens to be a common issue for a lot of people.
Okay, cool. So that's all the questions we have for now. So.
Okay, no problem. So on to the next one, PoE, right? I run into PoE often because a lot of times I'm doing upgrades, AP upgrades fairly quickly, right? A lot of times in a building, I might just assume that the switch can handle it. And then I find out that, I had 10 APs in this room, but only like 4 or 5 of them are connecting to the controller, for example. So PoE can be a problem if you make a mistake that I do, where I don't check PoE budget, for example, on the switch, or maybe you've gotten a call or got a ticket saying the LED on the APs doing the different LED colors, or maybe it's just not on, right? It's dark. So I've gotten tickets where people say, hey, you have an AP here, it just got deployed, but it's off. Or maybe the AP is going through this constant reboot cycle, right? It comes up, joins a controller or something, and then goes back down, or you keep pinging it and it's responding to ping, but then it drops. So it could be connected to the switch, but not even serving any clients, right? That's possible as well. So these could be signs of power over Ethernet problem. And here in this test, what's nice with the Etherscope is right away I can plug in and go, oh, there's no PoE. So with an AP, when you plug in the AP and you see that the LED doesn't come on, that's also a sign like, oh, there's no PoE. That could either be that cable's not plugged into the switch, right? That could be an issue, because here in this test, that's where the test fails. It just says no PoE detected. I don't, here it does tell me like which switch port, but if it wasn't plugged in, it would just kind of fail at the very beginning. There's no connection. From that point, like let's say it does say no PoE detected, but it does give me a switch name and a port. To me, if that occurs, then that's possibly PoE is not enabled on that port, or the switch doesn't support PoE, right? So that's why I have that bullet there. Like, is your switching infrastructure ready for an AP upgrade? Either you still have switches that need to be upgraded themselves, or you have APs that exceed the PoE capability of the switch port. So you want to check if PoE is supported, at how much power a port's going to give for an AP, gather requirements up front before you start doing these upgrades, right? So what you really want to do is go, all right, I'm going to redesign this building, this floor, this room, whatever it may be. And you look at it, go, all right, I have 10 APs, max 30 watts per AP, add that all up, look at your switch and go, what is the max PoE capability of the switch? Do you exceed that number? If so, then we gotta change out the switch, maybe add another power supply in that switch if it has another slot. And then the other thing you have to consider too is that switch, what is the max power that each port will give you, right? So I run into situations again where I've depleted the PoE budget of the switch where I was able to use like 6 ports, but after that, any other APs that I plug in doesn't get any power, or it doesn't give you enough power. So that's this other slide here where I don't know how many of you guys have worked with a Cisco 1562E, but I do know that if it doesn't get enough power, it could power up the AP, but it won't power up the radios, right? So you'll see that the AP is connected, but no one can join Wi-Fi. They don't see the SSID because it's not broadcasting. It's either because all the radios are powered down because there's not enough PoE, or maybe just some of the radios are powered, maybe half the radios are powered down. And so with PoE, you have to understand the PoE standards, right? What AP are you purchasing and what its capability is? Is it a 802.380 AP? If so, then 30 watts is what you'll be looking for on a switch port. If it's higher, the newer standards, like 802.3BT, then you want to maximize the full PoE capability of these APs, then you'll need more power per switch port. And so with testing that, it's really just logging into the switch and or getting the spec sheet of the switch and understanding its PoE capability, how many ports get how many watts, because sometimes not all switch ports are going to be the same power capability. So always look at that spec sheet, match it up with your APs. Or if you have an Etherscope, you can do in the quick test, I can define what power device class I want to test for. So if I'm going to do UPoE APs, I'll select that and then I'll run a quick test, right? So this could be for like an environment you're going to upgrade, and maybe the field techs are going to go out and test each port. And so on the left screenshot, you can see that I do pass for class 4, right, 25.50 watts. On the right side, I tested UPoE. My switch did not meet the requirement to provide UPoE, so I know I cannot plug in a UPoE AP into that switch port. And so that's just one of the ways you can troubleshoot. I think the easiest way is just really look at the spec sheet for your switch, log into the switch. I know with Cisco, I think it's like show inline power or show power inline, but one of those 2 commands, and you'll be able to see if you have either depleted your PoE budget, how much you have left. So maybe you want to add 2 more APs to that switch. You can see if that's possible.
Yeah, Royal. So
and that table, yes.
Yeah. So going back to one of the topics you mentioned. So we've seen cases, for example, like you said, there's not enough PoE, but the AP turns on, but it only turns on some of the radios. So you can see the AP is up, you can connect to it, but it will be at a lower performance or lower data rates. For example, instead of being 4x4, it starts working at 2x2, for example.
2x2, yeah. Yeah, that's the scenario I ran into with the Cisco 1562, right? We needed to do outdoor deployments, but we didn't have enough switches to upgrade the switches. So we could only plug in this AP in particular into 1 switch port and lost 2 of the radios. Since it was outdoor and most people were using their phones, I wasn't too concerned about dropping down to a 2x2. But I know some other people maybe people who deal with numbers more, like the financial numbers, they might say this is a bad investment if we're buying a higher capable AP, but only using like half of its capability, for example, right? Like you're only using half of the radios. Like I can see people having arguments like that. And so that's why it's just good to understand your PoE requirements. So that way you don't go buying an AP that might be 25% more in cost, and maybe just get the right size AP that fits the PoE budget of your switch.
Yep. Yeah, also, how will that affect, for example, MoMIMO? Because if you have an AP with 4 streams, you will expect it on a MoMIMO environment to be able to serve more devices, but now you're taking it down to 2 by 2, for example, and then,
Yeah. So I have a personal opinion on it because I have not found a good way to document performance increases or decreases with it enabled. And so for me, it's more about when we talk about performance, I know I run into users all the time who will do something like a speed test, right? That's just how they love to test performance. And so when you do something like this where we lose 2 of the radios, yeah, you'll lose performance, right? Because I just don't know what that number will be because I don't have a way to document. There's no command line output that I know of that tells me what that current performance is. But the way I view it is more of like trying to meet the actual requirements that needs to be done on site, and have that client come back to the requirements, but still try to make it so that their expectation levels for performance is still there. So there's going to be a lot of discussion around performance requirements, because sometimes people's performance expectations don't meet like the requirements they need, or they're way beyond the requirements they need. But I just don't know if it works very well, to be honest. Like MU-MIMO.
Okie doke. So
and this table I got online, so I'm not a PoE expert by any means. I just know what max power I need to have per port depending on the AP and the 802.3 PoE standard. But you can find like all these tables online. They have a power device class and also a max power that is given to the port.
Yeah.
So another thing that I see sometimes is like link negotiation. And this is probably one of the, it doesn't happen all the time, but it happens when I come across bad cables. And obviously it's not a Wi-Fi issue, right? Like Wi-Fi is trying to work the best it can with the data rates it's trying to provide. But if those data rates are higher than like your link negotiation, then yeah, you're gonna have a problem, right? So here I actually simulate an issue. I don't keep bad cables on me, right? So I have users who experience low Wi-Fi, and in your scenario, maybe after troubleshooting everything RF related, you come to the conclusion it's not Wi-Fi, not a Wi-Fi issue. And if you had checked the physical layer first, right, and we'll talk about like that methodology, is you may have been able to see that issue right away. And here in the Etherscope, it's a test, and it shows that it negotiated at a 10 megabit per second speed using half duplex. So right away, there's a problem, right? The way you can see this is looking at the switch port level and seeing like, a show interface to see what it negotiated to. And sometimes you will see 10 meg or 100 meg, and oftentimes I see this in older installs using older cabling or a bad install with the cabling. And so I've come across those cables where they just negotiate for speeds because they just weren't terminated properly. So you either got to test those cables and then re-terminate the ones that were bad, or even run new ones. And so this is where that testing cables before the deployment, I think, is a good idea. It does take a lot more time. It takes more investment, right? Because someone can certify each cable. And maybe you want to do that for the newer speeds like a Cat 6, Cat 6A. You want to certify those cables and test them out. But you can see this at the switch port level. You could also see it like if you're using Meraki, for example. I saw this once not too long ago, I think a couple months ago, where users kept complaining about Wi-Fi either dropping or the speeds were slow. And so I determined that it wasn't really a drop. I saw that the AP was always online, but it was negotiating at like 100 megs, and um, the cable itself was bad. So like sometimes I would see that connection just flap really quick. And so after they re-terminated that cable, everything was good. It came up at a gig speed. And that's what we want to see for each AP, so we can realize the full performance of our APs, right? Or get better performance out of our APs. We don't want the wired infrastructure to be that limiting factor. Even though it can be, it's still going to show up as a Wi-Fi issue, right? And so here in the arrows, I'm just pointing that that link there negotiated 10 megabits, and then the HDX is the half duplex. So it's giving me that warning right there. So your users will have low throughput. So when it comes to troubleshooting, like sometimes you want to start at the physical layer first, just roll that out right away, right? Especially if it's kind of like this big issue that might be widespread and like the Wi-Fi infrastructure looks good.
So quick question, when it comes to cable termination, what's the most common issue you see? Is it like bad pinouts, or is it shorts, grounds?
I see bad pinouts. I did a deployment a couple of weeks ago, and I just saw bad pinouts everywhere. Like it was obvious that whoever installed the cabling did not test it. And so I was testing each one before I put an AP because I had spent too much time on it. I was looking at an AP going, it's getting link light, but on the infrastructure side, it doesn't see it coming up. So something was wrong. It was getting some sort of power, but data wasn't going through or something. Yeah. So after I figured out it was the cable, because what I ended up doing, and here's how I typically tell people how to troubleshoot this, is it's not working down at like the like where the port is, either by the user's desk or in the ceiling. Take that AP, bring it, and use a known good cable, just connect it directly to the switch. If it comes up and it's working just fine, it's probably a cabling issue, probably, right? So you would want a tool to test and verify that it is, so you can go to the right person and go, look, I did test this cable. Here's the pinout, it's incorrect, or it's short, whatever it may be. And that way, one, it makes you look really good, right? Like you know what you're talking about, you've tested it, and you can say, well, here's what we need to do next to fix this. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right. So the other issues, right? Again, Wi-Fi isn't working. What could it be? And so these are not like the more common issues on the edge switches themselves, but this is where I take on the troubleshooting methodology. Like one of those is like the onion approach, where you're gonna troubleshoot layer by layer, right? That this onion's got multiple layers, so you peel away at each layer until you can get to that root cause. And the problem could be part of security. Maybe it's port security. If you're one of those environments where port security is enabled, it can be an administrative burden to keep track of all those authorized MAC addresses, right? And so maybe that MAC address of the AP wasn't put in to the switch to authorize traffic, right? Or many of these issues just go beyond the switch. It's just a DHCP server problem. It's a DNS server problem. Maybe not even a DNS server on your property, on your network. It could be, the bigger DNS servers, or Google DNS servers. And some of these come in the form of bugs, where the switch isn't passing DHCP packets. I see this, I'm gonna put Cisco under the bus, but I see this bug all the time at Cisco, where people start saying, I'm not getting an IP address. I have a 169 address. And in the end, after troubleshooting, it turns out, because on a lot of my switches, we enable DHCP snooping, just so rogue DHCP servers don't come up and start handing out IP addresses. So if I turned off DHCP snooping, then everything worked. And so it turned out to be a bug in that specific version of code, where DHCP snooping just stopped passing the DHCP packets. even though it was supposed to. Like everything was configured properly, but it was a bug. So this is where the troubleshooting is an important skill to develop, right? I wouldn't just 100% rely on the tools. I mean, it'll help you. The tools will help you, but you have to analyze those results that the tools give you. And so you have to make the right call. You have to go, you know what, maybe that result isn't what I expected. What should I do now, right? So that's where the troubleshooting skills is something that's important to develop, and it'll come over time, right? Like the more issues you come across, the more better you'll have with experience when it comes to troubleshooting. Like no one will just know the answer right away once you see an issue. And I'm still like that when it comes to routing, for example. I'm not a big routing guy. So when I walk into a very complex routing environment, when I know it's not the AP, I know it's not the cabling, I know it's not the switch, and it's now I'm going across a subnet, right? Like I can communicate within the subnet, but now I got to go to a different subnet. Maybe something with routing and do some of the basics, but that's a skill that I need to develop. And so when I walk into environments, I always ask, what could possibly be an issue here, right? With the wire, the edge switches. And so I know some of you have probably seen much worse environments, but like that first, the larger picture is like a stack of like 3 switches, and it's like super high up. Like that's me raising, I'm short. That's me raising my phone to take a picture. I can't see the switch ports. Additionally, this is in a kitchen. So while I'm looking at this, there's people trying to prep food, and you know, gotta somehow troubleshoot a switch issue here. The top right photo, there's a switch somewhere in there, right? Trying to trace these cables can be a pain, and that's where those tools come in handy, right? If someone said, you know, it's on the panel, it's labeled as AP, and they're trying to trace a cable that's longer than it needs to be, and then I know this happened to many of you. You traced it, and you somehow managed to trace onto the wrong cable, and you go, this is the port. And so you change it, but the AP is still up for some reason, or it's not coming up because you actually used the wrong cable. That's why I like to use tools to trace which port it's connected to. And then the bottom right is not too bad, but it's like, okay, why do you stack all those switches on top of each other with no cable management? Again, what could go wrong on an edge switch?
Yeah, and you can notice that almost nothing there is labeled either. So it's like, hey, we have spaghetti wiring here and no labels.
Yeah. So one of the things I do, and here's a tip for people, just purchase a label maker. Get one for yourself. It'll save you when you need it, because here is when I actually label the cable and say this is this AP, right? I document like what if the patch is labeled on the wall, for example, I'll label that on the label maker and tag that Ethernet cable. Just so it helps you in the future when you need to troubleshoot it again.
Yep. Make yourself and whoever else comes next a favor by labeling the cables.
Yeah. And that's all I have.
Okie doke, great. Well, thank you, Roel, for that. Great presentation. And now, guys, we still have some time, like 5 more minutes. So if you have any questions, feel free to type those into the QA section. Don't be shy about it. Any comments, any feedback is also welcome.
Yeah, well, if anyone has any questions, I can talk about another scenario I came across where it was on the edge switch, but it was fiber related. I was having a meeting, and it was my presentation was done over Wi-Fi, and we were in the room, and then you could see on my laptop that the Wi-Fi drops, and we started going, well, that's not supposed to happen. We knew there was work being done, but it wasn't supposed to happen on that floor. And so it turned out that somebody was trying to trace the fibers. And mind you, this is during like a production day. Someone was testing the fibers, which meant they have to like unplug the fiber, clean it, label it. And when they reconnected it incorrectly. And so the people on staff didn't know what to do, because they're kind of freaking out. It's kind of a VIP level, all the VIPs on that floor. And basically all the switches went down. There was no connectivity, not even wired. I just happened to have a fiber light on me, and right away I knew it was fiber, because when someone said they were testing the fiber, I was like, it was a fiber problem. So I had a fiber light on me. They ended up moving the fiber to a different port for whatever reason, down in the MDF. And so I was like, well, let's label this fiber, because it wasn't labeled. I put a light on the one end and they could see it blinking on the other. They connected it properly and everything came up. See, it's not a Wi-Fi issue.
No, not at all. Geez, you will think that kind of stuff will be done during, I don't know, non-production hours.
Yeah, somehow there was no change control there, so it was a wild west, right? That's the same environment as that top right one, so that top right photo.
Okay, well, then that explains part of it at least.
You can see how it goes. Oh, for sure.
Oh my. Okay, guys, any other questions? I see Eric here just made a comment. TS intermittent disconnects.
Yep.
Okay,
so there's a few things I always keep in my bag that are not Wi-Fi related, which would be a fiber light, some SFPs. I carry 1 gig and 10 gig SFPs with me. Usually the single mode, I don't really carry multi-mode, although I've seen multi-mode. And sometimes I carry an Ethernet for a patch or a fiber, because I have seen fiber either broken by like rats or something. And some of the fiber, sometimes you got to roll it. I don't know if you guys understand that, where I've had someone call me in because a switch didn't come up. I had to drive about an hour out there. And this is where you start learning this, learning this troubleshooting over time, is when you have the user kind of describe the issue, I probably could have told them over the phone, roll the fiber, because that's all I had to do. I had to unplug it, roll it, reconnect it, and then it came up. And so like they saw the APs come up because it was being powered by the switch, but there just wasn't a connection.
Oh, so when you say roll the fiber, what difference does that make?
Yeah, there's one side where the light is being sent out from the switch and one being received. So it just wasn't, the polarity wasn't. See, I'm not like I don't know all the details about fiber. It's more like, this is what I've learned being in the closet. Being in the network closet is, oh, this needs to be.
Nice. Oh, so we have a few comments here, not questions exactly, but one is from James. The proper term for that fiber light is called a visual fault locator. Just in case you are looking to actually purchase one. There you go, guys. So if you want to buy one,
you can get it on Amazon for $25. It's very useful. And don't look straight in your eyes, okay? It's a laser, so don't look into it with your eyes. And when you plug it in to the fiber port, like don't go to the other end and start looking at it directly in your eyes.
Oh yeah, that sounds like a dangerous thing to do. Oh, also some comments here, some feedback. Great presentation. Glad to see it was from a real field technician, not a company sales engineer. So real life experience. Great job, Roel. Okay, though, guys. So I think regretfully we're running out of time. So unless there's any other questions on the queue, I want to thank Roel for joining us today. It was a great session. Thank you very much, Roel. I hope you'll join us again in the future. Also, quick reminder, our next tech chat will be next month. So make sure not to miss it. We'll be providing details on social and via email, so you guys will know who our next special guest will be. And well, I think that's all for today, guys. Thank you for your time, and I hope you'll join us again soon. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys.